The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street of Maplewood Drive, where Margaret Chen had lived for 30 years. At 72, she had watched the neighborhood transform, from young families with tricycles scattered across driveways to a mix of elderly residents and new homeowners. Her small blue house with white trim had remained constant through all these changes, a testament to her steadfast nature. Margaret's daily routine had been disrupted 3 months ago, when the doctor delivered news that would change everything. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he had said, his voice gentle but firm. 6 months, maybe 8, if she was lucky. The words had hit her like a physical blow, not because she feared death, but because it meant leaving behind the one constant companion who had filled her days with unconditional love for the past 8 years. Buddy. A golden retriever, mixed with soulful brown eyes and a coat that caught sunlight like spun gold, had been Margaret's shadow since the day she rescued him from the county shelter. He had been returned twice by previous owners who complained he was too attached, too needy. Margaret had seen it differently. She saw a dog who simply needed someone to love completely, and she had been more than willing to be that person. The cancer had progressed faster than anyone anticipated. What started as occasional fatigue and loss of appetite had quickly escalated to severe pain and the need for stronger medications that left Margaret feeling disconnected from her own life. Her daughter Sarah, who lived 3 states away in Colorado, had been making increasingly frequent trips to help manage her mother's care. On this particular Tuesday morning, Margaret sat in her favorite recliner by the living room window, watching Buddy patrol the backyard with the dedication of a soldier on duty. Even at 8 years old, he maintained his vigorous inspection of every corner, every fence post, every potential threat to his beloved human's domain. His routine brought her comfort in a way that nothing else could. The hospice nurse, Patricia Williams, had become a regular visitor over the past 2 weeks. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands, Patricia had seen countless families navigate the difficult journey of terminal illness. She had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when someone was entering their final stage, and she recognized those signs in Margaret. Patricia knocked softly on the front door before using her key to enter. Buddy immediately appeared in the hallway, tail wagging but eyes alert. He had accepted Patricia as part of Margaret's care team, but he never let his guard down completely. Every visitor was assessed, every movement monitored. "Good morning, Margaret," Patricia called softly as she hung her jacket on the coat rack near the door. "How are we feeling today?" Margaret turned from the window, her face pale but managing a weak smile. "Buddy's been restless all night," she said, her voice hoarse from the medications. "He keeps coming to check on me every hour. I think he knows something I don't." Patricia had worked with enough terminal patients to understand the unique bond between humans and their pets during end-of-life care. Animals seem to possess an intuitive understanding of their human's condition that often surpassed medical predictions. She had witnessed dogs who refused to leave their owner's bedside, cats who became unusually affectionate, and countless other examples of pets providing comfort in ways that humans simply couldn't match. "Animals are remarkably perceptive," Patricia said as she began her routine assessment of Margaret's condition. "Buddy might be sensing changes that aren't obvious to us yet. Has he been eating normally?" Margaret nodded toward the kitchen where Buddy's food and water bowls sat barely touched. "He's been picking at his food for the past few days. Sarah bought him those expensive treats he usually loves, but he's not interested. All he wants to do is stay close to me." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Buddy padded into the living room and positioned himself directly beside Margaret's chair. His large head rested against her leg, and she automatically reached down to stroke his ears. The simple gesture seemed to provide relief to both of them. Patricia completed her examination, noting the subtle changes in Margaret's breathing and skin tone that indicated her condition was declining more rapidly than expected. She had learned to trust her instincts in these situations, and every instinct told her that Margaret's time was becoming very limited. "I think we should consider increasing your pain medication," Patricia suggested gently, "and I'd like to discuss some options for making you more comfortable over the next few days." The implication was clear, though unspoken. Margaret understood, and her hand tightened slightly in Buddy's thick fur. "How long do you think I have?" she asked directly, a quality Patricia admired about her patient. "It's difficult to say exactly," Patricia replied honestly, "but I think we should focus on each day as it comes. Is Sarah planning to visit again soon?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears, not for herself but for the loyal companion, who wouldn't understand why she would suddenly disappear from his life. "She's driving down tomorrow. We need to talk about what will happen to Buddy when I'm gone." This conversation was one that Patricia had facilitated many times before. The practical aspects of end-of-life planning were difficult enough, but when beloved pets were involved, the emotional complexity increased dramatically. She had seen families torn apart by disagreements over pet care, and she had witnessed the heartbreak of pets who never recovered from the loss of their primary caregiver.
Have you and Sarah discussed options for Buddy's future? Patricia asked carefully.
Margaret's face clouded with worry. Sarah's allergic to dogs, and she lives in a small apartment. Her husband travels constantly for work. I know they can't take him, but I haven't figured out what else to do. The thought of him ending up back in a shelter, her voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Buddy seemed to sense the distress in Margaret's voice. He lifted his head and studied her face intently, then placed one large paw on her lap in a gesture of comfort that made both women's eyes water. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. James Harrison, Margaret's veterinarian for the past 8 years, knocked on the door with his familiar gentle rap. Patricia opened it to find the tall, silver-haired man holding a small bouquet of flowers from his wife's garden. "I hope I'm not intruding, Doctor," Harrison said quietly. "I heard from Sarah that Margaret wasn't doing well, and I wanted to check on both of my patients." Margaret's face lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing the man who had cared for Buddy through puppyhood illnesses, routine vaccinations, and a scary bout with bloat 2 years earlier. Dr. Harrison had always treated Buddy with the same gentle professionalism he showed to all his animal patients, but Margaret had sensed a special fondness for her golden companion. "Dr. Harrison, what a wonderful surprise," Margaret managed, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "Buddy will be so happy to see you." As if he had been waiting for permission, Buddy bounded toward the veterinarian with enthusiasm that had been missing for days. Dr. Harrison knelt down to receive the enthusiastic greeting, running his experienced hands over Buddy's coat and checking his condition with the automatic assessment of a lifelong animal doctor. "He's lost some weight, Dr. Call," Harrison observed, "but otherwise he seems healthy. How has he been behaving?" Margaret described Buddy's recent changes in appetite and his increased vigilance. Dr. Harrison nodded knowingly. In his 40 years of veterinary practice, he had observed the profound connections between pets and their humans countless times. He had seen dogs who seemed to take on their owners' illnesses, cats who provided comfort during chemotherapy treatments, and animals who appeared to understand the gravity of situations in ways that defied scientific explanation. "I've been thinking about Margaret and Buddy quite a lot lately," Dr. Harrison admitted. "In fact, I have a proposition that might interest you both." Patricia noticed how Buddy positioned himself between Margaret and Dr. Harrison, not in a protective stance, but rather as if he were part of the conversation and needed to hear what was being discussed. "My practice has grown over the years," Dr. Harrison continued, "and I've been looking for the right therapy dog to help with some of our more anxious patients. Buddy has always had such a calm, intuitive nature. I've seen how he responds to stressed animals in the waiting room, how he seems to know exactly when someone needs comfort." Margaret's eyes widened with interest and hope. The possibility that Buddy could continue to help others, that his capacity for love and comfort could be channeled into meaningful work, seemed like an answer to prayers she hadn't known how to pray. "What exactly would that involve?" she asked, leaning forward despite her physical discomfort. Dr. Harrison explained his vision. He had been researching animal-assisted therapy programs and had seen remarkable results in veterinary settings, where calm, well-trained dogs helped reduce anxiety in both animal patients and their human families. Buddy's temperament and his obvious ability to sense emotional needs made him an ideal candidate. "He would live with my wife and me," Dr. Harrison explained. "We have a large property with plenty of space for him to run, and our own dogs would welcome a new pack member. During the day, he would come to work with me and help provide comfort to animals and families who are going through difficult times." The idea seemed to energize Margaret in a way that nothing had for weeks. The thought of Buddy not just surviving her death, but thriving in a role that utilized his natural gifts felt like the greatest gift she could give him. "But he's not trained as a therapy dog," Margaret pointed out practically. "Doctor," Harrison smiled. "The formal training is important, but Buddy already has the most crucial qualification, an intuitive understanding of when someone needs comfort. The rest can be taught. I know a wonderful trainer who specializes in therapy animals certification." As the afternoon wore on, the three adults discussed the practical aspects of transitioning Buddy to his new life. Dr. Fouché. Harrison suggested that Buddy begin spending time at the veterinary clinic immediately, allowing him to gradually adjust to his future environment while Margaret could still be part of the process. "I think it would be good for both of you," Patricia added supportively. "Margaret, you could see how well Buddy adapts, and Buddy can begin building new relationships while still having you as his anchor. The plan gave Margaret a sense of purpose that had been missing since her diagnosis. Instead of simply waiting for death, she could actively participate in preparing Buddy for a future that honored their bond, while creating new opportunities for him to share his gift for comfort with others. That evening, as Margaret prepared for bed with Patricia's help, Buddy followed his established routine of checking every room in the house before settling on the rug beside Margaret's bed. But tonight, something was different. Instead of his usual restless vigilance, he seemed calmer, as if the day's conversations had somehow reassured him about the uncertain future. Margaret reached down from her bed to stroke his head. "Tomorrow we'll go see your new workplace," she whispered. "You're going to help so many other families just like you've helped me." Buddy's tail thumped softly against the floor, and for the first time in weeks, Margaret fell asleep without the crushing worry about his future weighing on her heart. Outside, the quiet suburban streets settled into evening stillness, unaware that within the small blue house, a remarkable partnership was beginning to take shape that would touch more lives than anyone could imagine. The next morning brought Sarah's arrival from Colorado, her car loaded with supplies, and her face etched with the exhaustion of someone trying to balance her own family responsibilities with her mother's declining health. Sarah Chen Rodriguez had inherited her mother's practical nature, but struggled with the emotional weight of watching her lifelong hero fade away. Buddy greeted Sarah at the door with polite enthusiasm, remembering her from previous visits but maintaining his primary focus on Margaret's location and well-being. Sarah had always appreciated Buddy's devotion to her mother, even though her own allergies prevented her from forming a close bond with him. "Mum, you look better than I expected," Sarah said, though her eyes betrayed her concern as she noted the subtle changes that had occurred since her last visit 2 weeks ago. Margaret was seated at the kitchen table, dressed and alert, clearly making an effort to appear stronger for her daughter's sake. Buddy lay at her feet, his position allowing him to monitor both the conversation and any changes in Margaret's condition.
Dr. Dadgett.
"Harrison came by yesterday with the most wonderful news," Margaret began, and proceeded to explain the therapy dog opportunity. As she spoke, Sarah watched her mother's face transform with an enthusiasm that had been absent for months. Sarah listened carefully, her analytical mind working through the practical implications, while her heart appreciated the obvious comfort this plan provided her mother. She had been dreading the conversation about Buddy's future, knowing that her own living situation made caring for him impossible, but hating the alternatives they had discussed. "This sounds almost too good to be true," Sarah said cautiously. "Are you sure, Doctor?" "Harrison understands what he's taking on. Buddy is wonderful, but he's also completely bonded to you. What if he can't adjust?" Margaret's hand found Buddy's head, and he leaned into her touch with complete trust. "We're going to start the transition today," she explained. Dr. Harrison suggested that Buddy spend a few hours at the clinic each day, getting used to the environment and meeting the trainer. That way, we can see how he responds. Patricia arrived mid-morning to find the mother and daughter deep in planning mode. Maps were spread across the kitchen table showing the layout of Dr. Harrison's veterinary clinic, and Sarah was taking notes about the therapy dog training process on her laptop. "I've been researching therapy animal programs online," Sarah reported. "The success stories are incredible. There's documentation of dogs who help reduce pre-surgical anxiety in human hospitals, others who provide comfort during difficult procedures. If Buddy has a natural aptitude for this work, he could genuinely help hundreds of families." Patricia checked Margaret's vital signs and noted improved energy levels that she attributed to having a concrete plan for Buddy's future. In her experience, terminal patients often experience surges of strength when they felt their final responsibilities were being properly addressed. "I think starting the transition gradually is wise," Patricia agreed. "It gives everyone time to adjust, and Margaret can see firsthand how well Buddy adapts to his new environment." At noon, Dr. Harrison arrived as scheduled to take Buddy for his first visit to the veterinary clinic. Buddy seemed to understand that something significant was happening. His usual excited greeting of Dr. Harrison was tempered with uncertainty as he looked back at Margaret for guidance. "It's okay, boy," Margaret said softly. "Go with Dr. Harrison. I'll be here when you get back." The veterinary clinic occupied a modern building on the outskirts of town, designed with both functionality and comfort in mind. The waiting area featured comfortable seating, calming artwork, and an open layout that allowed natural light to fill the space. Dr. Harrison had specifically chosen design elements that would reduce stress for both animals and their human families. Buddy entered the clinic cautiously, his nose working overtime to process the complex mix of scents that defined a veterinary environment. Unlike his previous visits as a patient, Today he was being introduced as a potential member of the staff team. "I want you to meet someone very special," Dr. Harrison said to his receptionist, Linda Martinez, who had worked at the clinic for 15 years. "This is Buddy, and if things work out, he'll be joining our therapy program." Linda, an animal lover who had advocated for therapy programs in veterinary settings, immediately understood Buddy's potential. She knelt down and allowed him to approach at his own pace, speaking in the calm, gentle tone that experienced animal professionals used to establish trust. Buddy's assessment of Linda took several minutes. He studied her face, allowed her to touch his ears, and seemed to evaluate her sincerity before offering a tentative tail wag. It was the beginning of what would become an important professional relationship. The clinic's current patients that day included a nervous German Shepherd recovering from hip surgery, an elderly cat receiving treatment for kidney disease, and a young Labrador puppy getting his second round of vaccinations, Dr. Harrison observed carefully, as Buddy was introduced to each situation. With the German Shepherd, Buddy approached slowly and lay down several feet away, offering calm presence without imposing himself on the anxious animal. When the elderly cat showed signs of stress during her examination, Buddy positioned himself where the cat could see him, but maintained a respectful distance that didn't add to her anxiety. Most remarkably, when the puppy began crying during his vaccinations, Buddy moved closer to the examination table and made soft, reassuring sounds that seemed to comfort both the puppy and his worried young owner. "He's a natural," whispered Dr. Krabby, Harrison's veterinary technician Jessica Wong, who had been skeptical about adding a therapy dog to their practice. "Look how he reads each situation differently."
The trainer, doctor.
Harrison had contacted Maria Santos, arrived mid-afternoon to conduct an initial assessment. Maria had been working with therapy animals for over 20 years and had developed an intuitive ability to recognize dogs with exceptional potential for comfort work. "Most dogs can be trained to behave appropriately in therapeutic settings," Maria explained as she watched Buddy interact with the clinic environment. "But some dogs have an innate understanding of emotional needs that can't be taught. They seem to know when someone needs space, when someone needs closeness, when someone needs distraction, and when someone needs simple presence." Maria's evaluation involved exposing Buddy to various scenarios designed to test his reactions to stress, noise, unexpected movements, and emotional displays. She had Buddy observe while she pretended to cry, while she acted frightened, while she displayed anger, and while she showed excitement. Buddy's responses demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence. When Maria pretended to cry, he approached slowly and offered gentle contact. When she acted frightened, he positioned himself as a calm anchor without being intrusive. When she displayed anger, he maintained a peaceful presence that seemed to diffuse tension. When she showed excitement, he matched her energy appropriately without becoming overstimulated. "In 20 years of training therapy animals, I've rarely seen such intuitive responses," Maria told Dr. Harrison privately. "This dog doesn't just have potential, he has a gift." Back at Margaret's house, the afternoon was proving challenging. Despite her improved spirits about Buddy's future, Margaret's physical condition continued to decline. Sarah noticed increased difficulty breathing and periods of confusion that indicated the cancer's progression. Patricia suggested adjusting Margaret's medication schedule to provide better comfort, but Margaret was reluctant to increase doses that might make her too drowsy to participate in Buddy's transition process. "I need to be present for this," Margaret insisted. "If these are my last days with him, I want to be fully here." Sarah understood her mother's determination, but worried about unnecessary suffering. They reached a compromise. Margaret would accept increased pain medication only during periods when Buddy was at the clinic, allowing her to be alert and present when he returned. When Dr. Harrison brought Buddy back home that evening. Both Margaret and Sarah could see positive changes. Buddy seemed more confident, carrying himself with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there that morning. He went immediately to Margaret for reassurance, but his demeanor suggested excitement about his new experiences rather than stress. "He was remarkable, Dr. Corwin," Harrison reported. "Maria was impressed, the staff was amazed, and even our most anxious patients seemed to respond to his presence. I think we found his calling." Margaret's eyes filled with tears of relief and pride. Throughout Buddy's puppyhood and adult years, she had always known he was special. Seeing that gift recognized and valued by professionals gave meaning to their years together that transcended her approaching death. "Tell me about everything," Margaret requested, and Dr. Harrison provided detailed accounts of Buddy's interactions throughout the day. As he described Buddy's intuitive responses to different animals and situations, Sarah found herself amazed by the depth of her mother's companion's emotional intelligence. She had always seen Buddy as a loving pet, but the potential for him to provide professional-level comfort to families in crisis added a dimension she hadn't previously recognized. That evening, Margaret made a request that surprised everyone. "I want to come to the clinic tomorrow," she announced. "I want to see Buddy in his new environment, and I want to meet Maria properly." Patricia expressed concern about the physical demands of such a trip, but Margaret's determination was unmistakable. Sarah suggested a compromise, a brief visit during the clinic's quieter afternoon hours, with wheelchair assistance and someone on standby to bring Margaret home if she became too tired. Dr. Harrison enthusiastically supported the plan. "I think it would be beneficial for Buddy to have you there during his training session," he said. "It might help him understand that you approve of his new role." As the household settled into evening routines, Buddy demonstrated behaviors that everyone noticed but no one fully understood. Instead of his usual restless patrol of the house, he spent time in each room, as if memorizing details. He lingered by Margaret's favorite chair, sniffed around Sarah's temporary belongings, and spent extra time examining the photographs that covered Margaret's mantle. "It's like he's trying to remember everything," Sarah observed quietly to Patricia. Patricia nodded. In her experience with terminal patients and their pets, she had witnessed similar behaviors before. Animals seemed to understand approaching loss in ways that humans struggled to accept, and their coping mechanisms often included what appeared to be deliberate memory creation. Margaret called Buddy to her bedside that night and spent longer than usual talking to him in the soft, private voice she reserved for their most intimate conversations. She told him about their 8 years together, about the joy he had brought to her life, and about the important work he would do helping other families. "You're going to be wonderful at this new job," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All those families who are scared and sad, they're going to feel better because of your special heart." Buddy listened with the focused attention he gave to all of Margaret's important communications, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished speaking, he placed his head on the bed beside her and remained completely still, as if processing everything he had heard. Outside, the neighborhood settled into quiet stillness, but inside the small blue house, the bonds between a dying woman and her devoted companion were being transformed into something that would extend far beyond Margaret's remaining time. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries about Buddy's remarkable abilities, and the beginning of a transition that would honor their love while creating possibilities neither of them had imagined. The morning of Margaret's planned visit to the veterinary clinic dawned grey and drizzly, matching the somber mood that had settled over the house. Margaret had experienced a difficult night, with pain levels that required stronger medication, leaving her groggy and weak. Sarah questioned whether the trip was wise, but Margaret's determination remained unshakable. "This might be my only chance to see Buddy in his new world," Margaret said softly but firmly. "I need to know he'll be happy there." Patricia arrived early to assess Margaret's condition and prepare her for the outing. The wheelchair Dr. Harrison had borrowed from the clinic sat ready by the front door, and Sarah had packed a bag with medications, blankets, and emergency contact information. Buddy seemed to understand that today was different. He stayed closer to Margaret than usual, occasionally resting his head against her leg as if offering extra support. His behavior suggested an awareness that Margaret needed additional care, demonstrating the same intuitive understanding that had impressed Maria during his evaluation. The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes through familiar neighborhoods that Margaret watched with unusual intensity, as if seeing them for the last time. Buddy rode in the back seat, his attention divided between the passing scenery and monitoring Margaret's condition from his position behind her. Dr. Harrison had prepared his staff for Margaret's visit, and Linda Martinez had rearranged the reception area to accommodate the wheelchair while maintaining a calm environment for other patients. When they arrived, Buddy immediately took position beside Margaret's chair, establishing himself as her primary guardian while remaining alert to his new professional environment. "Margaret, I'm so glad you felt strong enough to come," Dr. Maven, Harrison said warmly. "I think you'll be amazed by what we're going to show you today." Maria Santos had designed a special training session specifically for Margaret's visit, incorporating scenarios that would demonstrate Buddy's developing skills while allowing Margaret to participate in his progress. The first exercise involved introducing Buddy to a family with a nervous rescue dog who was visiting the clinic for the first time. The rescue dog, a small mixed breed named Luna, trembled in her owner's arms while her new family tried to comfort her. Luna had been abandoned twice in her short life and displayed severe anxiety around strangers, new environments, and other animals. Margaret watched from her wheelchair as Maria guided Buddy through his approach to this delicate situation. Buddy studied Luna and her family carefully, then positioned himself several feet away and simply lay down, making himself appear as non-threatening as possible while remaining visible to the anxious dog.
Notice how he's not trying to interact directly, Maria explained to Margaret.
He's offering what we call parallel presence, being nearby without demanding attention or creating additional stress. Gradually, Luna's trembling decreased as she became accustomed to Buddy's calm energy. After 15 minutes, she showed enough confidence to sniff in Buddy's direction, and eventually she allowed her family to move closer to where he lay. This is exactly the kind of work Buddy will be doing, Dr. Harrison told Margaret, helping anxious animals and their families feel more comfortable during difficult visits. The demonstration continued with various scenarios. Buddy was introduced to an elderly man whose beloved cat was receiving treatment for a serious illness. The man was clearly distraught, alternating between pacing and sitting with his head in his hands. Without any prompting from Maria, Buddy approached the man slowly and sat beside his chair. When the man looked down, Buddy made gentle eye contact and leaned slightly against his leg, not enough to be intrusive, but enough to provide comforting contact. He did that on his own, Margaret whispered to Sarah, her voice filled with pride. No one told him that man needed comfort. The elderly man began stroking Buddy's ears and his agitation visibly decreased. When the veterinary technician came to update him on his cat's condition, he was calm enough to ask thoughtful questions and make informed decisions about treatment options. "This is remarkable," the man said to Dr. Harrison. "I've been a wreck all morning, but something about this dog just makes me feel like everything will be okay." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she witnessed Buddy's natural ability to provide comfort to complete strangers. Seeing him successfully transition from being her personal companion to serving a broader purpose filled her with a profound sense of completion. The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge that would test Buddy's abilities in ways no one had anticipated. A family arrived at the clinic with their teenage daughter and her severely injured rabbit, the victim of a neighbor's dog attack. The girl was hysterical with grief and guilt, blaming herself for leaving the rabbit's cage unlocked. The rabbit's injuries were serious, requiring emergency surgery with an uncertain outcome. The family was torn between authorizing expensive treatment with no guarantee of success and making the difficult decision to end their pet's suffering. Dr. Harrison worked quickly to stabilize the rabbit while the family struggled with their decision in the waiting room. The teenage girl, Emma, sat curled in a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, while her parents tried to provide comfort they didn't feel themselves. Buddy observed the situation for several minutes, then approached Emma's chair. Instead of his usual gentle contact, he did something Margaret had never seen before. He carefully placed his front paws on Emma's chair and rested his chin on her shoulder, providing the kind of close, enveloping comfort typically reserved for those experiencing profound grief. Emma's sobbing gradually quieted as she wrapped her arms around Buddy's neck. For 20 minutes, they remained in that position while their parents discussed options with Dr. Joa Harrison. Buddy seemed to understand that this level of distress required his most intensive comfort response. "I've never seen him do that before," Margaret said quietly to Maria. "He's never been that physically affectionate with anyone except me." Maria nodded thoughtfully. Some therapy dogs develop different levels of response based on the intensity of the emotional need they're sensing. Emma's distress was so severe that Buddy escalated his comfort response accordingly. The rabbit's surgery was successful, though the recovery would be long and uncertain. When Dr. Harrison delivered the cautiously optimistic news, Emma's relief was overwhelming. She hugged Buddy tightly, whispering thank you into his fur before rejoining her family to discuss post-surgical care. "That dog saved my sanity today," Emma's mother told Margaret as they prepared to leave. "I don't know how we would have gotten through this without him." As the afternoon progressed, Margaret's energy began to fade noticeably. The excitement of seeing Buddy's success had sustained her longer than expected, but Patricia could see the signs of exhaustion that indicated they needed to return home soon. "Just one more demonstration," Margaret requested. "I want to see him with other animals." Maria arranged for Buddy to interact with the clinic's permanent residents, 2 cats who lived at the facility and served as blood donors for emergency surgeries. These cats, Oliver and Sophia, were well socialized to clinical environments, but typically remained aloof from visiting dogs. Buddy's approach to the cats demonstrated yet another aspect of his emotional intelligence. With Oliver, an older male who projected confidence, Buddy maintained respectful distance while acknowledging his presence. With Sophia, a younger female who showed signs of skittishness, Buddy employed the same parallel presence technique he had used with Luna, making himself available for interaction without forcing it. After 10 minutes, Sophia cautiously approached Buddy and rubbed against his side, behavior that surprised everyone, including Dr. Harrison, who had never seen her interact positively with visiting dogs. She's usually very selective about her friendships, Dr. Harrison commented. Buddy must project exactly the right energy for her comfort level. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Margaret requested a few minutes alone with Buddy in one of the quiet examination rooms. Sarah helped transfer her from the wheelchair to a comfortable chair, then left mother and dog to have their private conversation. "You're going to do such important work here," Margaret told Buddy, her voice weak but filled with love. "All those scared animals and worried families are going to feel better because of your special heart. I'm so proud of you." Buddy listened with the intense focus he always gave to Margaret's serious communications. When she finished speaking, he placed his head in her lap and remained perfectly still, as if memorizing the moment. "I want you to remember that I love you, and I'll always love you, even when I can't be here anymore." Margaret continued, "Dr. Harrison and Maria and all these wonderful people are going to take care of you, and you're going to take care of them too." The ride home was quiet, with Margaret resting against Sarah's shoulder while Buddy maintained his watchful position in the back seat. The day had been emotionally and physically demanding, but Margaret felt a peace she hadn't experienced since her diagnosis. That evening, as Patricia helped Margaret prepare for bed, they discussed the remarkable transformation they had witnessed in Buddy's confidence and purpose.
"He's found his calling," Patricia observed.
"It's like he was always meant to do this work, and being with you was the preparation for his real mission." Margaret nodded weakly.
"I used to worry that I was being selfish, keeping him so close to me."
But maybe that closeness taught him how to recognize when others need the same kind of love. Sarah joined them for Margaret's bedtime routine, something that had become a nightly ritual as her mother's condition declined. They reviewed Margaret's medications, discussed plans for the following day, and addressed practical concerns about Margaret's care. "I want to call my lawyer tomorrow," Margaret announced. "I want to make sure there are legal provisions for Buddy's transition to Dr. Harrison's care. I don't want any bureaucratic complications." Sarah made notes about the legal arrangements, understanding her mother's need to ensure every detail was properly handled. They also discussed Margaret's wishes for her own final arrangements, conversations that had become easier to navigate now that Buddy's future was secure. Buddy followed his evening routine of checking each room in the house, but tonight his patrol seemed different. He spent extra time in rooms that held special memories, the kitchen where Margaret prepared his meals, the living room where they spent countless evenings together, the backyard where they had played during his younger years. When he finally settled beside Margaret's bed, his behavior reflected a new understanding of his role. While he remained attentive to her needs, there was a sense of purpose that extended beyond their immediate relationship. He was no longer just Margaret's companion. He was becoming a healer whose work would begin in earnest very soon. Margaret reached down to stroke his head one more time before sleep, grateful beyond words that their love had found a way to continue serving others long after their time together would end. 3 days after Margaret's visit to the clinic, her condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. What had been a gradual decline suddenly accelerated, leaving Sarah scrambling to manage her mother's care while processing her own grief. Patricia increased her visits to twice daily, and Dr. Harrison offered to suspend Buddy's training sessions to allow him to remain home with Margaret. "No," Margaret said firmly despite her weakened state. "Buddy needs to continue his training. This is exactly when he needs to understand that his work is important, even when I'm not feeling well." Sarah was torn between admiring her mother's strength and worrying about the additional stress of Buddy's daily absences. But she recognized the wisdom in Margaret's decision. Buddy needed to develop independence from their household routine if he was going to successfully transition to his new life. Margaret's lawyer, Robert Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, arrived that afternoon to finalize the legal arrangements for Buddy's care. Margaret had known Robert for 15 years, and he had helped her navigate the legal aspects of pet ownership, including emergency care provisions and end-of-life planning. "I've drafted a comprehensive agreement that transfers ownership to Dr. Harrison while establishing a small trust fund for Buddy's ongoing care," Robert explained. "This ensures that if anything happens to Dr. Ken Harrison, there are backup provisions and financial resources to maintain Buddy's welfare." Margaret reviewed the documents carefully, despite her fatigue. Every detail mattered when it came to ensuring Buddy's future security. The agreement included provisions for his veterinary care, training expenses, and even specifications about his living conditions and work schedule. "I want to add one more provision," Margaret said thoughtfully. "I want Buddy to have regular visits with families who have lost their own pets. I think his experience with loss could help others who are grieving." Robert made notes about the additional provision, impressed by Margaret's thoughtfulness even in her declining condition. Sarah watched her mother handle these final responsibilities with the same careful attention she had given to every aspect of Buddy's 8-year care. That afternoon brought Buddy's most challenging training session yet. Maria had arranged for him to work with a family whose elderly dog was being euthanized after a long battle with cancer. The family had specifically requested that a therapy dog be present during their final goodbye. The situation was emotionally complex for everyone involved. The dying dog, a 13-year-old golden retriever named Max, was alert, but clearly suffering. His family, parents, 2 adult children, and 3 grandchildren ranging in age from 6 to 16, were gathering to say their final farewells. Dr. Harrison explained the situation to Buddy before they entered the room, speaking in the calm, professional tone he used during difficult procedures. Buddy listened with focused attention, then followed Dr. Harrison into the room where Max lay on a comfortable blanket surrounded by his grieving family. The youngest child, 6-year-old Jamie, was having the most difficulty understanding and accepting what was happening. She kept asking when Max would feel better and wanting to give him treats that he was too sick to enjoy. Her parents were struggling to balance their own grief with helping their daughter process her first experience with death. Buddy assessed the situation carefully, then made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of positioning himself near Max, which might have created additional stress for the dying dog, Buddy approached Jamie and lay down beside her chair.
He knows that little girl needs him most right now, whispered Jessica Wong, the veterinary technician assisting with the procedure.
Jamie immediately began stroking Buddy's fur, finding comfort in his warm presence while her family said their individual goodbyes to Max. When it came time for the euthanasia procedure, Buddy remained perfectly still, providing steady comfort while Jamie watched her beloved companion slip peacefully away. Max would have liked you, Jamie told Buddy through her tears. You're a good dog too. The family's grief was profound but manageable, thanks in part to Buddy's calming influence during their most difficult moments. As they prepared to leave, Jamie's grandmother spoke privately with Dr. Harrison. That dog has a gift, she said quietly. He somehow knew exactly what each of us needed. Our granddaughter will remember this day differently because of his presence. When Buddy returned home that evening, Margaret could see the emotional weight he was carrying. His work at the clinic was meaningful but demanding, requiring him to absorb and process intense emotions from multiple sources throughout each day. Come here, boy, Margaret called softly from her bed, where she now spent most of her time. Buddy approached slowly, his head low with fatigue. Margaret spent an hour gently stroking his fur and speaking to him in soothing tones, helping him decompress from his challenging day. This routine had become essential, just as human counselors needed support after difficult sessions. Buddy needed emotional care to maintain his ability to serve others. You did something very important today, Margaret told him. You helped a little girl understand that love doesn't end when someone dies. That's the most valuable gift you can give anyone. Sarah watched this nightly ritual with growing understanding of the complex relationship between her mother and Buddy. She was beginning to see how their 8 years together had prepared Buddy not just for loss, but for helping others navigate loss as well. You've been training him for this work all along, haven't you? Sarah asked her mother after Buddy had fallen asleep beside the bed. Margaret nodded weakly. Not intentionally at first. But over the years, I realized that Buddy had an unusual capacity for understanding emotions. I started paying attention to how he responded to my moods, my health issues, my stress about aging. He always seemed to know exactly what I needed. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Emma, the teenage girl whose rabbit had been injured earlier in the week, arrived with her mother to deliver a handwritten letter addressed to Buddy. The rabbit, whose name was Clover, had survived surgery and was beginning to recover, though the process would take several more weeks. Emma has been asking about the therapy dog every day, her mother explained. She wanted to thank him personally and tell him about Clover's progress. Emma knelt beside Buddy and read her letter aloud, her voice steady despite the emotional content. She thanked him for helping her stay calm during the crisis, described Clover's slow but steady improvement, and promised to visit him at the clinic in the future. I've decided I want to become a veterinarian, Emma announced, seeing how Dr. O'Beer, Harrison helped Clover and how you helped me made me realize this is what I want to do with my life. Margaret listened from her bed, too weak to join the conversation in the living room, but able to hear Emma's words. The knowledge that Buddy's comfort had inspired a young person to pursue a career helping animals added another layer of meaning to his work. After Emma and her mother left, Margaret asked Sarah to help her write her own letter to Buddy. Her handwriting was shaky, but her words were clear. My dearest Buddy, by the time you can understand what this letter says, I won't be here anymore. But I want you to know how proud I am of the important work you're doing. You have a special gift for helping others feel better when they're scared or sad. Use that gift every day and know that somewhere I'm watching and celebrating every family you help. Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in Buddy's file at the clinic, where Dr. Harrison could share it with him when the time felt right. That afternoon, Patricia made the recommendation that everyone had been dreading but expecting. Margaret's condition had deteriorated to the point where she needed round-the-clock care, and her breathing difficulties indicated that her time was very limited. I think we're looking at days rather than weeks, Patricia said gently. We should discuss arrangements for Buddy's transition to his new home.
Margaret's response was characteristically practical.
I want Buddy to start sleeping at Dr. Harrison's house tonight, she decided. He needs to begin forming his primary attachment there. I don't want his last memory of me to be watching me die. The decision was heartbreaking but wise. Buddy had already witnessed enough suffering during his therapy work. Margaret wanted to spare him the trauma of experiencing her death directly. Dr. Harrison arrived that evening to collect Buddy and his belongings. The transition was carefully orchestrated to minimize trauma while honoring the bond between Margaret and her beloved companion. I want 10 minutes alone with him, Margaret requested, and everyone else retreated to give them privacy for their final goodbye. Margaret struggled to sit up in bed so she could look directly into Buddy's eyes. His understanding of the situation was evident in his solemn attention to her words. You've been the best companion I could ever have asked for, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Now it's time for you to be that same wonderful companion to lots of other families who need your help. Remember that I love you and I'll always be proud of you. Buddy remained motionless as Margaret kissed the top of his head, as if he understood the significance of the moment. When Dr. Harrison quietly entered the room, Buddy turned to look at him, then back at Margaret, then stood up and walked slowly to Dr. Harrison's side. Good boy, Margaret whispered, as tears streamed down her face. Go do your important work. Sarah watched from the doorway as Buddy left the house without looking back. Following Dr. Harrison to the car with the dignity that spoke to his understanding of his new responsibilities. She had never fully appreciated the depth of communication between her mother and Buddy until she witnessed their farewell. That night, Buddy slept in Dr. Harrison's home for the first time, in a comfortable bed near the fireplace where the veterinarian's own dogs had welcomed him into their pack. Despite the emotional difficulty of leaving Margaret, Buddy seemed to understand that this transition was necessary and right. Meanwhile, Margaret spent her last night in the home she had shared with Buddy for 8 years, surrounded by the memories of their life together, but comforted by the knowledge that their love would continue to serve others through his work. She drifted into peaceful sleep, knowing that she had given Buddy the greatest gift possible, a meaningful purpose that would honor their bond while creating new possibilities for healing in the lives of countless others. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, 3 days after Buddy moved to Dr. Harrison's home. Sarah was beside her bed, holding her hand as her breathing gradually slowed and then stopped. Patricia had prepared Sarah for this moment, but the finality of her mother's death still came as a shock despite months of anticipation. The funeral arrangements had been planned weeks in advance, reflecting Margaret's practical nature and desire to spare her family additional stress during their grieving period. She had requested a small, private service followed by cremation, with her ashes to be scattered in the backyard where she and Buddy had spent countless hours together. Dr. Harrison faced the delicate decision of whether to bring Buddy to the funeral. Some experts argued that allowing pets to witness funeral rituals helped them understand and accept their owner's death. Others believed it could cause unnecessary trauma. After consulting with Maria and considering Buddy's emotional sensitivity, they decided to let Buddy attend the graveside service but not the formal funeral proceedings. Sarah stood in her mother's backyard, surrounded by a small group of Margaret's closest friends and neighbors, as the minister spoke about a life well lived and a love that transcended death. When it came time to scatter the ashes, Dr. Harrison quietly brought Buddy to join the gathering. Buddy's behavior during the service demonstrated his remarkable emotional intelligence. He remained calm and respectful, positioning himself near Sarah, as if understanding that she was now the primary family member who needed his support. When the minister concluded his remarks, Buddy approached the area where Margaret's ashes had been scattered and sat quietly for several minutes, as if paying his own respects.
He understands, whispered Margaret's neighbour, Mrs.
Thompson, who had watched Buddy grow from puppyhood. That dog knows she's gone, and he's saying goodbye properly. After the service, Sarah faced the emotional challenge of clearing out her mother's house. Dr. Harrison offered to help, and together they sorted through Margaret's belongings, setting aside items that would remind Buddy of their shared life together. Among Margaret's papers, Sarah discovered a journal that Margaret had kept during her final months. The entries revealed the depth of her planning for Buddy's future and her growing excitement about his potential as a therapy dog. The final entry, written just days before her death, read, "Buddy is ready for his new life. I can see the confidence growing in him every day. He's learned that his capacity for love is not limited to one person, but can extend to anyone who needs comfort. This knowledge will serve him well in his important work. I am at peace knowing that our love will continue to heal others long after I'm gone." Sarah decided to share excerpts from the journal with Dr. Harrison and his team, understanding that these insights into Margaret's thoughts would help them better support Buddy during his ongoing transition. The first month after Margaret's death was challenging for everyone involved in Buddy's care. Despite his successful adaptation to the clinic environment, he exhibited signs of grief that required careful management. He was less enthusiastic about his meals, spent time searching for Margaret in familiar locations, and occasionally displayed the restless behavior that had characterized his final days with her. Maria worked with Dr. Harrison to develop a grief support routine for Buddy that included extra exercise, consistent schedules, and regular visits to locations that held positive memories rather than sad associations.
They discovered that Buddy responded well to increased responsibility at the clinic, as if meaningful work helped him process his loss.
6 weeks after Margaret's death, Buddy demonstrated a breakthrough that amazed everyone involved in his care. A family brought their terminally ill cat for euthanasia, and their 8-year-old daughter was struggling with the same kind of overwhelming grief that had characterized Buddy's early days without Margaret. Without any direction from Maria or Dr. Harrison, Buddy approached the grieving child and began providing comfort in a way that seemed informed by his own experience with loss. He didn't try to distract her from her sadness or encourage her to feel better quickly. Instead, he simply sat with her sadness, offering steady presence while she processed her emotions. "It's like he's sharing what he learnt about grief," Maria observed to Dr. Harrison. "He's not trying to fix her feelings. He's just showing her that someone can be sad and still be okay." The little girl eventually stopped crying and began talking to Buddy about her cat, sharing memories and expressing fears about forgetting her beloved pet. Buddy listened with the same focused attention he had always given to Margaret's important conversations. "My cat would have liked you," the girl told Buddy, echoing the words that Jamie had spoken months earlier during Max's euthanasia. "You understand about missing someone, don't you?" This interaction marked the beginning of Buddy's emergence as a specialized grief counselor for children experiencing pet loss. Word of his remarkable abilities spread throughout the veterinary community, and Dr. Harrison began receiving requests from other clinics for Buddy's assistance during particularly difficult cases. 3 months after Margaret's death, Sarah received a call from Dr. Harrison with unexpected news. The American Kennel Club's therapy dog program had nominated Buddy for a national award recognizing exceptional service in animal-assisted therapy. The nomination cited his innovative work with grieving families and his unique ability to provide comfort informed by his own experience with loss. "Margaret would be so proud," Sarah told Dr. Harrison through tears. "She always knew Buddy was special, but I don't think even she imagined he could touch this many lives." The award ceremony was scheduled for 6 months later, giving Buddy's team time to document his work and prepare a presentation about his methods. Maria began keeping detailed records of Buddy's interactions with families, noting patterns in his responses and techniques that could potentially be taught to other therapy dogs. As Buddy's reputation grew, so did the scope of his work. He began visiting human hospitals to work with children who had lost pets, conducted grief counseling sessions at animal shelters, and participated in community programs designed to help families prepare for pet loss. One particularly meaningful case involved an elderly man named Frank, who was struggling to decide whether to euthanize his suffering dog. Frank had been avoiding the decision for weeks, unable to accept that his beloved companion's quality of life had deteriorated beyond recovery. Buddy spent an hour with Frank and his dog, demonstrating through his calm acceptance and gentle interactions that love sometimes means letting go. Frank later told Dr. Harrison that watching Buddy's peaceful presence with his dying dog helped him understand that euthanasia was an act of love rather than betrayal. "That therapy dog taught me something about love that I didn't know before," Frank said. "He showed me that taking care of someone sometimes means helping them leave when it's time." A year after Margaret's death, Sarah visited the clinic to see how Buddy had evolved in his new role. She found him leading a grief support group for children who had recently lost pets, working alongside a child psychologist who had specifically requested his assistance. Buddy moved from child to child with practiced expertise, offering different types of comfort based on each child's individual needs. With shy children, he provided gentle presence. With angry children, he absorbed their emotions without judgment. With confused children, he offered patient companionship while they processed their feelings. He's become something Margaret never could have imagined, Sarah told Dr. Kaur Harrison as they watched Buddy work. He's not just a therapy dog, he's a teacher who helps people understand that love survives loss. Doctor. Harrison nodded in agreement. Margaret gave him something that most therapy dogs never receive, a deep personal understanding of the grieving process. That experience has made him uniquely qualified to help others navigate their own losses. The clinic had grown to accommodate Buddy's expanding work, adding a dedicated room for grief counselling sessions and hiring additional staff to support the increasing demand for his services. Buddy's success had inspired other veterinary clinics to develop similar programs, creating a network of therapy dogs trained specifically to work with grieving families. On the second anniversary of Margaret's death, Sarah returned to her mother's old house, which had been sold to a young family with children. The new owners had maintained the backyard garden where Margaret's ashes were scattered, and they welcomed Sarah's annual visit to remember her mother. As Sarah stood in the garden, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun with her mother's terminal diagnosis and led to Buddy's emergence as a nationally recognized therapy dog. The love between a dying woman and her devoted companion had been transformed into a healing force that continued to comfort hundreds of families each year. Dr. Harrison had arranged for Buddy to spend that afternoon with Sarah, giving them time together to remember Margaret and celebrate the legacy she had created through her thoughtful planning. Buddy seemed to understand the significance of the day, remaining close to Sarah while maintaining the calm confidence that characterized his professional work. "Your mum would be amazed by what you've accomplished," Sarah told Buddy as they sat together in Margaret's old garden. "You've taken her love and multiplied it into something that helps so many people." Buddy's response was the gentle attention he gave to all important communications, his eyes focused on Sarah's face as if he truly understood her words. When she finished speaking, he moved closer and rested his head against her leg, offering the same comfort he provided to countless grieving families. As the sun set over the garden where Margaret had spent her final months planning Buddy's future, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. Her mother's love had not ended with death but had been transformed through Buddy's work into an ongoing source of healing for others facing similar losses. The small blue house on Maplewood Drive now sheltered a new family's happiness, but its legacy lived on in the remarkable therapy dog who had learned about love, loss, and the healing power of presence within its walls. Margaret's gift to the world continued to grow with each family that Buddy comforted, each child he helped through grief, and each person who learned from his example that love truly does transcend death. Buddy's work had become more than anyone had imagined possible, but at its heart remained the simple truth that Margaret had recognized 8 years earlier when she adopted him from the shelter. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from the unconditional love of a devoted companion who understands that being present in someone's pain is the greatest gift one being can offer another.